The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the usual morning quiet before the rush, but something colder, intentional. The hum of office lights, the muffled clatter of keyboards from across the hall, familiar sounds, but today they felt distant, like I wasn't part of them anymore. I walked past the glass wall to my corner office and stopped. My nameplate was gone. Not replaced, not updated, just removed. No brass rectangle, no bold serif typeface that once read Marcus Doyle, Director of Strategic Analytics. Only a faint rectangle of glue residue remained, like a shadow of someone no longer needed. At first, I thought it was a clerical thing, a mistake. Maintenance forgot to replace it after the repainting last week. But then I saw the new VP's assistant walk by. She avoided eye contact. That was confirmation. Something was off. Inside the office, nothing had moved. My mug was still there. Data doesn't lie, but you might. My notebooks, 2 pens arranged perfectly parallel. Even the plant Helena gave me last Christmas. But the calendar? Empty. No strategy briefings, no executive syncs. I sat down slowly, like a guest in a house I used to own. Then my phone pinged. Hey, Marcus Eden wants a 10 a.m. realignment chat in Conf B. Just you and HR. Should be quick. Grace. Exec. Assistant. Realignment. That word told me everything. They weren't going to fire me. They were going to phase me out. Quietly. Neatly. Strategically. I built the Strategic Analytics division at Zacor from a 2-desk experiment in a back hallway. 11 years ago, I joined the company when it was still renting office space from a law firm. Back then, our dashboards were Excel sheets, printed and stapled by interns. I didn't have pedigree, no Ivy League degree, just an instinct for patterns and an unshakable belief that data only matters when someone understands what to do with it. In 2013, I rebuilt the entire client performance model during a weekend outage. In 2016, I led the architecture overhaul that allowed us to onboard 5 new financial partners without a single crash. By 2022, my division handled 60% of Zacor's revenue, and our retention rate was the highest in the firm. But none of that made me untouchable, especially not when Eden Shaw arrived. She came from Fintech, a rising star from a venture-backed firm that specialized in sales-driven SaaS scaling. Young, sharp, armed with buzzwords and whiteboard confidence. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she'd bring new energy. Maybe she'd learn. But within 3 weeks, I noticed a pattern. She never asked how we'd kept our churn rate under 5% for 5 years. She never asked how we customized metrics for legacy clients, or why we didn't fully automate risk reports. She just wanted scale. She called my division legacy overhead in a strategy session. She said I was too human-dependent in a client meeting. She suggested I repurpose myself into a mentoring asset, and I said nothing. I nodded. I played along. I thought I could adapt. Until I couldn't. That morning, I walked into conference room B at 9:58. Eden was already seated. HR sat beside her, clipboard ready, face neutral. She didn't look up. Thanks for coming, Marcus, Eden said without smiling. We're realigning teams to reflect a more agile structure. You've done important work here, but we believe your skill set is better suited to project-level advisory freelance capacity. I raised an eyebrow. You're letting me go? We're evolving. That's when I knew this wasn't a conversation. It was an obituary. A quiet, polite funeral for someone still breathing. I stood, adjusted my cuffs. I see. No hard feelings, she added, almost like an afterthought. I have none, I replied. Just clarity. I left the room with a manila envelope in hand and an office that already felt like a museum. Back at my desk, I packed slowly. A black moleskin filled with hand-drawn models. A framed quote from my mentor. Systems don't build trust. People do. 3 USB drives. A plant. The coffee mug. 12 years reduced to a box that didn't even need tape. No goodbyes. No thank you email from leadership. Just silence and a quiet message from the building's parking app that my corporate spot would expire in 24 hours. I drove home with the windows down. No music, no news. Just the hum of tires and the strange calm of knowing the door had finally closed all the way. I wasn't angry. I was awake. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened the Moleskine. I flipped past charts, notes, risk trees, and client diagrams until I reached the back of the list. Names, contacts, personal notes. These weren't prospects. They were people I'd shown up for. And I knew sooner or later they'd call. But I wouldn't reach out first. Not yet. Not because I was afraid. because I wanted the silence to do the speaking. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee and didn't open my email. No inbox, no Slack, no reports, no projections, just silence. And the list. My black moleskine sat in front of me like a loaded weapon. On the final pages, scribbled in my own shorthand, were over 30 names. Not clients, not accounts. People. People I had answered calls from at 2 a.m. People whose kids I'd met. People who didn't give a damn about Zacor's quarterly growth, but knew I always delivered when it mattered. For a moment, I considered calling one of them. Just one. Not to pitch, not to scheme, to inform. But before I could move, my phone lit up with a name that made my chest tighten. Miles Grant, COO, Chandler Mutual. I hadn't spoken to him in 5 months. Not since the launch of their tiered underwriting dashboard, which I personally roadmapped in a Holiday Inn conference room when their internal system failed. I answered, quietly. Marcus, he said, skipping pleasantries. Tell me it's not true. I exhaled through my nose. I assume you heard through the usual pipeline. Eastridge. Vanessa Bird mentioned it on a call. Well, I said, I guess the news is out. What happened? They called it a realignment. There was a pause, then a dry laugh. Let me guess. A new VP with 3 months of experience and a PowerPoint on modernizing infrastructure. Pretty much. They replaced you? Not sure they even called it that. I just stopped existing. Silence again. Then, we haven't heard from your team since February. We've submitted 2 queries. No response. I figured something was wrong. I stayed silent. He continued, voice lowering. If you're starting anything at all, I want in. I haven't even set up a company email address. I don't care. You built our system. You know our metrics better than my CTO. The firm can call it whatever they want. You and I both know who was holding the floor when the system nearly collapsed last year. I tapped the edge of the table slowly, thinking, this wasn't revenge, it was gravity. I'm building something, I said at last, but I'm not asking anyone to follow. You don't have to. That night, I created a new Gmail address. I registered the name Doyle Metrics LLC with the state of Georgia. I sent a contract template to Helena Kim, a former compliance officer I'd once saved from a disastrous vendor audit. She'd gone freelance 2 years ago and owed me a favor. She replied in less than 10 minutes. About time. I'm in. I rented a virtual office downtown, bought a domain, created a logo in Canva. No VC funding, no press release, no buzz. Just roots. Real ones. By the end of the weekend, Chandler Mutual had signed a 6-month contract. Retainer, $18,000. Month. Scope. Fractional analytics strategy with full oversight. On the invoice, I signed my name with a strange clarity. Marcus Doyle, founder, Doyle Metrics. It looked right. On Monday, I took a walk past Zacor's Midtown office tower. The building gleamed as always. The marble lobby polished, the elevators whisper quiet. I could almost see Eden upstairs, charting out replacements on a glass wall with color-coded sticky notes. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt peace. They had taken away my desk, my title, my access but not my client's trust. And trust? That's not transferable. By week's end, 2 more clients called. 1. Veritas Risk Group needed immediate triage after Zacor failed to update a model they'd commissioned during Q4. Another, Oakline Investments, had just been told their account manager had transitioned with no replacement assigned for 2 weeks. They both asked the same question. Where are you now? Not what are you offering? Not what do you charge? Just, where are you? I didn't even send a proposal. I just listened. Asked the same questions I always did. And at the end of each call, they said what Miles did. We're in. Just tell us where to send the paperwork. That Friday night, I updated the Moleskine. 3 clients, 2 contracts signed, 1 pending. Projected monthly revenue, $54,000. Employees, 0. Back office, my kitchen. I closed the book and whispered to no one in particular. They let me go, but I never left. I didn't announce anything. No LinkedIn update, no slick logo reveal, no personal journey post. I just kept showing up where I always had, quiet, consistent, unshaken. The market noticed. Within 10 days of Chandler Mutual signing with Doyle Metrics, I'd onboarded my second client. Eastridge Capital, led by Vanessa Bird, confirmed their transition by sending me a photo of their canceled Zacor renewal contract signed with a red Sharpie and captioned, "Time to work with grown-ups again." It made me laugh, but also made me pause. This wasn't just defection. This was an exodus. And not because I promised anything new. Because I promised nothing, except exactly what I'd always delivered. Vanessa didn't need another solutions architect. She needed me, the guy who called her back on weekends, who stayed up through a hurricane to migrate their systems before quarter close. And now she had me. Again. That Thursday, I walked into a shared workspace downtown, my first office since leaving Zacor. It wasn't much. One desk, a printer, and a view of the parking lot behind a taco truck. But it was mine. No board meetings, no politics, no innovation decks. Just the sound of keys clicking as I rebuilt my empire. Helena dropped by to go over contract revisions. She scanned the latest onboarding request from Veritas Risk Group and whistled. "Third legacy client," she said. "This is becoming a pattern. They're coming on their own." "Exactly," she replied, shutting the folder. "That's what scares them." That afternoon, I received an email from a contact at Oakline Investments, a firm I hadn't heard from in over a year. "Hey, Marcus. Heard from Chandler that you're operating independently. We've had some issues on the last 2 deliverables. Let me know if you're taking on more clients. J.A. Blythe." I hadn't realized how far the word had spread. By Friday morning, I'd spoken with 3 former clients, all quietly displeased with Zacor's post-realignment performance. One of them, a managing partner at a private equity firm, simply asked, "Why didn't they fight to keep you?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe because they thought they didn't need to. Zites our notices. On Monday, the silence broke. A call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. Then came the voicemail. "Marcus, this is Charles Eldridge, Director of Enterprise Accounts. I'd like to talk, nothing formal. Just want to understand the situation. We've had several accounts shift unexpectedly. Eden is aware. Please call me back." I didn't. Instead, I opened my email to see a message from Leah Collins, one of Zacor's internal project managers. Subject: Client shift. Notice: "Hi Marcus. Hope you're well. Just checking if you're engaging in active outreach to our accounts. We're seeing overlapping deliverables. Would appreciate some clarity." Leah: "Clarity?" I'd given them all the clarity they needed. They just hadn't been listening. The clients speak. That same week, Vanessa forwarded me a message from Zacor. "We understand your frustration and are happy to assign you a new relationship specialist with more institutional knowledge. We'd also be willing to extend a 10% discount for the inconvenience." Vanessa replied with one line: "Your discount doesn't understand my business. Marcus does." She blind copied me on the response. When I read it, something shifted inside me. Not pride, something quieter, like a door that finally shut. Zacor hadn't just underestimated me. They'd underestimated what happens when clients stop being treated like assets and start acting like people. People remember. And now, the remembering was costing them. The numbers begin to speak. By week 3, Doyle Metrics had 4 active contracts, 2 onboarding in progress, over $72,000, month in retainer fees, and 0 outbound sales activity. The phone kept ringing. The inbox stayed full. Even my personal number, which I had never handed out deliberately, began lighting up with area codes from New York, Boston, Austin. People were talking. I was no longer a liability. I was a refuge. One evening, after sending off a quarterly transition summary to Chandler, I looked up and realized it was 9:42 p.m. The office was dark except for my desk lamp and the glow of my laptop. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not exhaustion. Not dread. Purpose. Real, raw, earned purpose. They'd stripped me of my title. They'd erased me from a firm I helped build. They replaced me with jargon and dashboards. And now, my silence was echoing louder than their branding. I smiled to myself. No announcement needed. The market was announcing me for me. It wasn't a scandal. There was no press release, no boardroom explosion. It started with a simple line in an internal Slack at Zacor. "Can someone confirm why 3 legacy contracts are marked inactive with no transition notes?" Sent at 9:41 a.m. by a junior ops analyst. Ignored by 9:42. But the damage was already done. Within 48 hours, Eden Shaw was sitting in a closed-door meeting with the CFO, the legal team, and 2 VPs, reviewing a report labeled Client Attrition Report, Unplanned Exits, Q1. My name wasn't mentioned in the subject line, but it was between every line of the data. I didn't know the specifics at the time, of course, but I could feel it. Calls from clients no longer began with, "We're evaluating." They began with, "We're done." Veritas Risk Group sent me a complete transition request with a 3-day implementation window. No questions asked. Oakline called Zacor's support center 3 times, got transferred twice, and ended their contract after speaking with someone who didn't know what a regression waterfall was. By the end of the month, 5 of Zacor's largest B2B clients had terminated. I didn't campaign. I didn't push. I didn't have to. Zacor had spent years investing in scale, but not once had they invested in relationships. And now they were watching them walk out the door without even looking back. The email. It came on a Thursday afternoon. Subject line, "Let's talk," from Everett G. Stanton, the CEO. I hadn't heard his voice in months. I opened the message slowly. "Marcus, I hope this finds you well. I've been made aware of some significant client movement involving former accounts you worked closely with. I'd appreciate the opportunity to meet privately, no agenda, no lawyers. Just coffee. Your time, your terms. Best, Everett." I stared at the message. This wasn't a power move. It was a white flag. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Because the message came too late. Inside the storm, Helena forwarded me an internal document that had been leaked to her through a contractor. The title, Account Stability Assessment, Q2 Risk. My name appeared 6 times. The conclusions were brutal. 80% of departing clients cite relationship-based dissatisfaction. 72% of those same clients had previously been managed by Marcus Doyle. Attempts to re-engage have been met with skepticism or complete silence. Under suggested mitigation, someone had actually typed, "Explore short-term consulting buyback offer to Doyle Metrics, if viable." I nearly laughed. They wanted to buy back what they never owned. A knock at the door. Friday morning, someone knocked at the shared workspace. It was Eden. No warning, no assistant, no entourage. She stood in the hallway, wearing a crisp blazer and forced calm. "Marcus," she said. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. Really looked. This wasn't the woman who once told me, "We're shifting toward a more scalable framework you'll understand eventually." This was someone trying not to drown. "I won't take more than 5 minutes." I stepped aside. She entered the small glass room and looked around. The plant in the corner, the desk with 2 monitors, the whiteboard with half-sketched client architecture. "This is what you built?" she asked, trying to smile. "It's a start. You've made quite an impact." I didn't reply. She sat, crossed her legs, waited. Finally, she said, "Look, I made a mistake. We moved too fast. I misread your role, and now it's affecting the company." "You didn't misread," I said. "You just didn't value it." She inhaled sharply. "Everett's asking if there's any version of a consulting arrangement that could bring some of the transition under control." "Consulting," I repeated. "You want me to help fix the thing you broke by cutting me loose?" "I want a bridge, even temporary." I stood, walked to the window, watched as a delivery truck pulled away from the parking lot. Then I turned back to her. "You don't need a bridge, Eden. You need a mirror." She didn't speak, just nodded, once. Before she left, she turned at the door. "You really didn't poach anyone?" "No," I said. "But I showed up when they asked where the hell you were." By the numbers. That weekend, I tallied it. 8 clients. Nearly $100,000 monthly recurring. 0 sales team. 0 overhead. 1 founder. Me. Every client still called me directly. No ticketing system, no tiers. And they weren't just staying. They were referring. By Monday, Greystone Ledger, a boutique hedge fund I'd never worked with before, reached out after a client dinner with Eastridge. Subject: "We heard you don't pitch. We prefer that." I closed my laptop and sat back. This wasn't just about Zacor anymore. This was about everything they thought was replaceable, finally proving it wasn't. Their quiet collapse wasn't explosive. It was quiet, controlled, surgical, just like the way they had erased me. Now it was their turn to feel what absence really costs. On the first Monday of the new quarter, my inbox pinged at exactly 8 a.m. Subject: Proposal, Strategic Realignment, Doyle Metrics and Zacor. Sender: Everett G. Stanton. Attachments: 3 PDFs. CC: Legal, Eden Shaw, Finance. I stared at the subject for a long moment before opening the files. The offer was generous, at least on paper. 6-month transition contract, $250,000 base fee, stock options with accelerated vesting, non-solicitation clause waived for select clients. consulting partner, badge and co-branding privileges. And beneath all that corporate gloss, the real request emerged like a tumor in legal language. Assist Zacor in rebuilding confidence among high-value accounts that previously fell under your leadership. We recognize the strength of your client relationships and seek a collaborative path forward. Translation: help us stop the bleeding. We'll pay. I forwarded the email to Helena. Her reply: they're not trying to hire you back, Marcus. They're trying to buy your silence. She was right, but I wasn't angry. I was done being angry. I was just certain. A different kind of meeting. 2 days later, I agreed to a face-to-face with Everett. Neutral ground. A private corner table at a hotel cafe in Midtown. He was already seated when I arrived, tie loosened, eyes tired behind polished frames. Marcus, he said, rising with a practiced smile. Thank you for meeting me. I nodded, said nothing, and sat. There were no lawyers, no assistants. Just a cup of coffee and the weight of unfinished history between us. I'll be direct, he began. We didn't anticipate the impact of your departure. That's on us, but we're willing to make it right. I didn't flinch, he continued. The firm's in flux. Eden's role is under review. Clients trust you. We'd rather build a bridge than a barrier. I took a sip of coffee. You're late, Everett. He blinked. Not just by months, I said. By mindset. He exhaled slowly. Then help us reset the mindset. You are the foundation of our client loyalty. I didn't see it clearly until it started unraveling. You didn't see it because you weren't looking. He looked down at his coffee, suddenly older than I remembered. I can't undo what happened, he said, but I can offer you influence, visibility, power. That word made me smile. Power? I repeated. I've had more power in the last 90 days, working alone, than I ever had inside your tower. He leaned forward. So you're turning it down? No, I said. I'm erasing the scoreboard. He frowned. Meaning? I'm not playing the same game anymore, Everett. You still think this is about acquisition and containment. I'm building something that doesn't need to be protected by contracts. It protects itself through trust. He sat back, silent. I stood, slowly, and extended my hand. For what it's worth, I said, I appreciate you showing up. He shook it, eyes hollow. Then I walked out, leaving behind the last invitation to rebuild a broken foundation. The ripple becomes a wave. Within days of that meeting, Zacor announced internal restructuring. Eden Shaw stepped down. The board issued a memo about shifting client engagement philosophies, but it was already too late. Veritas had doubled their retainer with me. Oakline expanded their scope. Eastridge referred me to 3 more firms. The referrals were no longer trickles. They were a wave. 1 week after my meeting with Everett, I got a call from Kendrick Royce, managing director of Northline Advisory, a firm that had once publicly competed with Zacor for government accounts. We've been watching your trajectory, he said. Word is you're building something more real than anything we've seen in a decade. I'm trying to. How would you feel about acquisition? I paused. You mean hiring me? No, he said. We want to acquire you. Doyle Metrics. Fold you into our ecosystem, but with you at the helm. We don't need your numbers. We need your culture. It took everything in me not to laugh out loud. Where Zacor saw a rogue asset, Royce saw a blueprint for trust. I didn't accept immediately. I asked for terms, conditions, structure, but the shift was clear. I wasn't a man trying to recover what he lost. I was now a man holding something others wanted to build on. Legacy by design. That Friday, I held my first staff meeting. 5 team members, all hand-picked. Helena Kim, legal and risk. Omar Patel, analytics lead, formerly with a Zacor vendor. Tina Lau, client strategy, a referral from Chandler. Rory James, ops coordinator, ex-Zacor, voluntarily left. Me. We didn't have matching polos. We didn't have a mission statement. We had something better. Proof of delivery. Here's our North Star, I said, holding up a whiteboard marker. We don't scale for scale's sake. We scale when trust demands it. Never before. Everyone nodded. And for the first time in my career, I felt it. This wasn't survival. This was sovereignty. 6 months after I walked out of Zacor with a cardboard box and no warning, I stood at the head of a long conference table this time, not as an employee, as a founder. The quarterly review was just wrapping. 5 people sat with me now, people who chose this place, chose this mission, and chose me. A slide on the screen behind us read, Q2, summary. 1 point. $2 million. Revenue, 94%. Client retention, 0. Active sales campaigns. No champagne, no applause, just focused heads, calm nods, and a quiet kind of pride that didn't need to be spoken aloud. When the team left the room, I stayed behind. Saturday, alone for a while. Not because I was tired, because I was grateful. They had taken everything from my title, position, network access. And by doing so, they'd given me back myself. The unexpected message. That evening, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a hardcover notebook, clean and crisp, handwritten on the inside cover. Some foundations need fire to show their cracks. You built something better. If you're ever open to coffee just as people, not as titles, I'd appreciate it. Everett. I smiled. Not because I forgave him, because I finally didn't need to. There's no satisfaction in revenge when you've already outgrown it. The award. They never gave me. A month later, Doyle Metrics was named one of 5 emerging disruptors in applied analytics by a leading financial review site. They asked for a quote. I gave them this. Disruption doesn't start with innovation. It starts with trust. We didn't print t-shirts with it. We just kept showing up. One project, one report, one midnight call at a time. Because when you build something on trust, you don't need marketing to spread the word. You only need one client who says, this is the person who never dropped us when it got hard. And we had dozens. A legacy rebuilt. By the end of that year, we'd moved into a modest office of our own. 15 team members, all personally referred. No recruiters, no fluff. Our first full-time intern was Maya Vanessa Bird's niece, who once said to me over coffee, I don't know what I want to do yet, but I know I want to work somewhere. People mean what they say. I told her, that's all you need for now. Our firm had no ping-pong table, no kombucha machine, no neon slogans, just whiteboards, and one line above the door. Clients trust people, not logos. We didn't need more than that. The last client that returned. One day, a former Zacor client returned not to apologize, not to gossip, just to say, we made a mistake. I didn't gloat. I listened. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Are you ready to build something that lasts this time? They said yes. And we started again. But this time, we started on my terms. The silence that followed. I never posted the whole story online. No expose. No viral thread. No revenge post with 300,000 likes. I never needed to. Because the right people already knew. They knew what happened. And they knew what I did next. Epilogue. 1 year later. On the 1-year anniversary of the day Zacor let me go, I had lunch with Tina, Omar, and Helena. We laughed about that old office tower, the HR buzzwords, the offers they kept trying to send even after their own people started leaving. Zacor's stock had dropped 28% over the year. Their leadership changed. Again. Their clients? Many of them were ours now. But that wasn't the victory. The real win was this. Every person sitting at my table wanted to be here. Not because of money. Not out of fear. Because they believed in the thing no software could replicate. A human promise kept. Final lines. When they let me go, they thought they'd removed a risk. What they actually removed was the only thing holding the roof up. So I didn't burn the house down. I just built a better one next door. And now, they can see it from their window every single day.